We found Grandma Rose's secret ledger, but the entries exposed a web of lies that ended with a call. Our absent brother, Marcus, was dead, leaving behind a 9-figure inheritance. Just as we processed the shocking news, an armed mercenary stormed the attic, demanding something Grandma knew, and Marcus wasn't dead. He was hiding in a flooded quarry, waiting for an exchange. The attic air was thick with dust motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight, piercing the gloom. It smelled of mothballs, forgotten ambition, and the faint, sweet decay of aged paper. My sister Clara coughed, waving a hand in front of her face. We were on a mission, clearing out Grandma Rose's house after she passed. It was supposed to be a sentimental journey, a final goodbye to the woman who smelled perpetually of lavender and old lace. For me, it was mostly just heavy lifting. For Clara, it was an archaeological dig into our shared past. But for my brother, Marcus wasn't here. Marcus never was. That was the unspoken, aching truth hanging over every holiday dinner, every milestone birthday, every moment when the family actually needed a warm body. Mom would inevitably look toward the empty chair at Thanksgiving, her smile tightening just a fraction, and ask, "Has anyone heard from Marcus?" The answer was always a variation of no or a cryptic text message 2 weeks ago about how busy he is in the city. Marcus was the prodigal son, except he never returned from his wilderness. He just stayed stubbornly absent. He'd moved to Seattle right after college, trading our quiet Midwest town for what he vaguely described as high-level consulting, a term that meant nothing to anyone except perhaps Marcus himself. He'd missed Dad's 60th. He'd missed my wedding, sending a lukewarm e-card and a check that seemed more like a tax write-off than a gift. He certainly wasn't here now, sorting through Grandma Rose's collection of porcelain thimbles and slightly unsettling porcelain dolls. "Look at this," Clara mumbled, pulling a small leather-bound ledger from beneath a stack of yellowed linens. It looked less like a diary and more like an old bank book. "Do you think Grandma kept track of her bridge club debts in here?" I shrugged, wrestling a heavy steamer trunk open. It groaned in protest. Probably. She was meticulous about everything except letting us touch her secret stash of hard candies. Clara flipped the brittle pages. The handwriting inside was elegant, sharp. Definitely Grandma Rose's hand, but the entries weren't about bridge. They were dates, names, and then alternating columns of numbers under what looked like deposits and withdrawals. "These aren't small amounts, Ben," she murmured, her voice suddenly low. "Like thousands. And look at the dates. They go right up until last spring." We leaned in, the dust motes freezing in the weak light as we traced the entries. Most of the names were unfamiliar, old neighbors, distant cousins we'd never met. But then, about halfway down the third page, a name jumped out at me, stark and undeniable in the elegant script. M. Adler. "Marcus?" I whispered, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Marcus's middle name was Allen, but his initials were M.A. Wait, no. His first name started with M. Marcus. Why would Grandma be making deposits to or withdrawals from him? We hadn't spoken to him in months, and Grandma Rose hadn't left the house unassisted in 3 years. Clara looked up, her face pale. "That's impossible. He lives 3 states away. Why would Grandma be giving him money in secret, and why would she document it like a private trust?" Just then, my phone buzzed, vibrating violently against the dusty floorboards. I picked it up, annoyed by the intrusion. It was an unknown number, international calling code flashing across the screen. I almost ignored it, ready to tell whoever it was that I was knee-deep in mildew and mourning, but something made me answer. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was slick, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Am I speaking with Benjamin Adler?" "Yes. Who is this?" "Mr. Adler. My name is Mr. Davies. I represent the estate of Marcus Adler. I apologize for the sudden contact during this difficult time, but there's been an incident." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Incident? What incident? Is he—" "I'm afraid your brother passed away unexpectedly last Tuesday, Mr. Adler. I am calling because we need to arrange the immediate execution of his final wishes. and given your status as next of kin, there's a rather substantial inheritance that requires your immediate attention." The silence that followed Mr. Davies' final words was vast enough to swallow the entire dusty attic. I could hear Clara breathing rapidly beside me, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. Inheritance? The word echoed, sharp and dissonant against the backdrop of Grandma Rose's quiet passing. Marcus, the ghost in our family portrait, was dead, and he'd left something behind. Passed away? I finally managed, the word tasting like ash. When? Where? Why haven't we heard anything? Mr. Davies' tone remained maddeningly level, a practiced balm applied to chaos. He was involved in a rather unfortunate vehicular accident near his residence in Seattle. Due to the nature of his business and the necessity of discretion, contact was minimal. We only became aware of his immediate family structure through documentation reviewed after securing his affairs. "Discretion," Clara interjected fiercely, snatching the phone from my numb fingers. "What kind of business requires you to keep his family in the dark while he's supposedly alive, only to call us the second he's dead and there's money involved?" There was a pause on the line, a calculated hesitation. "Miss Adler, Mr. Marcus Adler, was a private individual. His assets are considerable, managed through complex offshore trusts. However, his last will and testament is quite clear. Everything, barring a small provision for a legal firm retainer, is to be liquidated and transferred to his surviving siblings, Benjamin and Clara Adler, in equal measure, immediately upon probate completion." I felt lightheaded. Marcus, the perpetually struggling consultant, had amassed a fortune? The Marcus who always borrowed $50 until next payday? "How much?" I asked, the question sounding greedy even to my own ears. "The current liquid assets approach 9 figures, Mr. Adler," Davies replied, the numbers making the attic feel suddenly very small. "And that doesn't include the real estate holdings, which are also bequeathed to you both." 9 figures. My stomach churned. This was more money than our entire extended family had seen in 3 generations combined. It was a seismic shift, a lottery ticket delivered via coroner, and it explained everything: the sudden absence, the vague business talk, the lack of contact. He hadn't been running away from us. He'd been building an empire in the shadows. "We need to see the will," I said, my voice regaining some semblance of authority. "And we need details about the accident. Who was he with?" "All documentation will be delivered to your residence tomorrow morning via courier, along with an initial contact form for the estate lawyers," Davies assured me. "As for the accident itself, I'm afraid the Seattle PD report is sparse. It was late, poor visibility, and he was alone in the vehicle. Tragic, but straightforward." He gave us a final confirmation time for the courier and disconnected. Clara dropped the phone onto the trunk. We stared at each other, the inheritance a tangible, suffocating presence between us. "He was never going to show up for Christmas," Clara finally whispered, her eyes still wide with shock, "but he shows up now, dripping in secret millions?" I walked over to the steamer trunk again, my hands moving with a sudden nervous energy. The will, the money, the secret life. It was all connected to this house, to Grandma Rose. "Wait a minute," I said, noticing something odd about the trunk itself. It wasn't just old, it was incredibly heavy, much heavier than its exterior suggested. I knelt down, running my hands along the interior bottom. The wood felt thick, almost double-layered. "What is it?" Clara asked, moving closer. I pushed hard on one corner seam, and with a soft click that sounded suspiciously like a hidden latch, a shallow drawer slid out from the base of the trunk, hidden completely from view when the lid was open. It wasn't filled with jewelry or bonds. It was filled with envelopes. Thick, heavy, cream-colored envelopes, all addressed in Grandma Rose's looping script. They weren't addressed to Marcus. They were addressed to us. I grabbed the top envelope. My name, Ben Adler, was written clearly on the front. Beneath my name, in smaller, almost panicked handwriting, were 3 words that made the air leave my lungs. "Don't open yet." Clara snatched hers. Her envelope had the same stark warning scrawled underneath her name. She knew, Clara breathed, her knuckles white as she gripped the paper. She knew he was hiding something, or she knew something was going to happen. I looked down at my envelope, the warning screaming at me, but the reality of Marcus's death, the staggering 9-figure sum, the slick lawyer, it was all too much to process rationally. I had to know what Grandma Rose, the sweet lavender-scented woman who baked cookies, had been hiding. I held the edge of the seal, ready to tear it open, when the front door downstairs slammed open with tremendous force, echoing up the stairwell. "Who is that?" I hissed, looking toward the attic door. We had specifically told the realtor we were the only ones with access today. A heavy set of footsteps started ascending the stairs, not the hesitant tread of a neighbor, but a deliberate, pounding rhythm. The steps stopped right outside the attic door, and the shadows beneath the door frame deepened as someone stood waiting, breathing heavily, right on the other side. The heavy breathing outside the door was ragged, almost desperate. It wasn't the measured, composed sound of Mr. Davies, the estate lawyer. This was raw, physical exertion. Clara and I froze, instinctively backing away from the door, pushing ourselves against the far wall behind a stack of dusty hat boxes. The silence in the attic, which moments ago had been filled with the specter of a dead brother and sudden wealth, was now dominated by the heavy thump-thump of a massive heart beating somewhere just beyond the thin wood paneling. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to sound steady, but my voice cracked on the last word. No response. Just a deep, shuddering inhalation, followed by a sound that made the hair stand up on my arms. The slow, metallic drag of something heavy being moved across the floorboards directly outside the door. "Clara, the phone," I muttered, reaching for the discarded receiver, but Clara was already holding Grandma Rose's ledger, her eyes fixed on the door. "Ben, look at the ledger," she whispered urgently, pointing to the page where Marcus's name was written. When we looked before, the page was dry. Now, look at the ink. I risked a glance. Where the crisp, dark ink detailing Marcus's supposed transactions had been, the handwriting was now slightly blurred, as if a drop of water or perhaps oil had just landed on it. The ink was definitely still wet, spreading subtly into the fibers of the aged paper. This was impossible. The ledger had been in our hands for less than 10 minutes. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click echoed through the room. It was the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The heavy latch we thought secured the attic door from the inside hadn't been keeping anyone out. It had been keeping us in. The door swung inward with a slow, agonizing creak, revealing not a lawyer, but a massive figure silhouetted against the brighter light of the landing. He was too broad for the doorway, forcing him to turn sideways to enter. He was dressed in expensive, dark tactical clothing, the fabric straining across his shoulders, and he carried nothing obvious. But his hands, large, scarred, and moving with predatory economy, were clearly visible. His eyes, shielded slightly by the brow of a dark baseball cap, swept the room once, dismissing the boxes and furniture, landing immediately on Clara and me, and then, finally, on the leather-bound ledger, still clutched in Clara's hand. "Where is the final ledger?" the man growled, his voice deeper than any human voice should reasonably be, laced with a harsh, unfamiliar accent. "The original. Hand it over now, and this doesn't have to involve the police." "The original?" I stammered, stepping slightly in front of Clara. "This is the only one we found. It details Marcus's withdrawals." The man took a slow step into the attic, and the floorboards groaned under his weight. "Your brother was careless. He thought covering his paper trail meant copying the records. He was wrong. The original lists the source of the funds, not just the transaction point. And I need to know what Rose told you before she died." He was looking for something Grandma Rose possessed, something that wasn't Marcus's simple inheritance. He knew about the ledger, and he knew Marcus was involved with Grandma Rose's secret finances. "We don't know what you're talking about," Clara insisted, her voice shaking but holding firm. She subtly slid the ledger behind her back, shielding it with her body. "We just found out our brother is dead." The man smiled, a terrifying stretching of the lips that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Oh, I know Marcus is dead. That part was necessary. But Rose made copies, didn't she? She always covered her bets. And those copies end up in the hands of the next of kin who actually bothered to show up for the funeral, which, hilariously, is you two." He took another, faster step, closing the distance in one fluid motion. He wasn't going for us. He lunged for the steamer trunk, his focus entirely on the hidden compartment we had just discovered. He slammed his massive fist down onto the base of the trunk where the drawer had slid out. The wood didn't just break. It splintered inward with a deafening crack. He clawed frantically at the splintered wreckage, clearly expecting to find more documentation tucked inside. "There's nothing else here?" I shouted, desperately trying to distract him. "Just this." I held up my own envelope, the one warning, "Don't open yet." "Just the letters." He paused, turning back slowly, his eyes narrowing on the cream-colored paper. He seemed to recognize the stationery instantly. "The letters," he breathed, a strange mix of awe and fury in his voice. "Rose's final testament to her own protection. Foolish boy, you've just opened the door to something far worse than a simple debt collection." He abandoned the shattered trunk and moved toward us again, his pace now dangerously quick. Clara, reacting purely on instinct, didn't hesitate. She ripped the seal on her envelope, pulling out the single folded sheet of paper inside, and before I could stop her, she flattened it against her chest and screamed, "It's not money. It's a location. He's not dead. He's hidden." The man stopped dead, his face contorting. "What did you say?" I looked down at the note in my own hand, my blood turning to ice as I finally ripped the seal. My eyes scanned the single, hastily scribbled line of Grandma Rose's writing, and I understood instantly why Marcus had been avoiding us, why the lawyer was so eager to settle the estate, and why this heavily armed man was standing in our grandmother's attic searching for secrets. The note read, "If you find this, Marcus never left. Check the tunnels under the old quarry. He's waiting for the exchange." The words swam before my eyes, stark and terrifying. Check the tunnels under the old quarry. He's waiting for the exchange. Marcus wasn't dead. He was waiting. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, driving the breath from my lungs. The slick voice of Mr. Davies, the sterile report of a vehicular accident, the urgent push to liquidate a 9-figure estate. It was all a meticulously constructed lie designed to clear the board for us, the unsuspecting siblings, to take possession of whatever Marcus had left behind, unwittingly stepping into his dangerous game. The hulking man in tactical gear, whom I now suspected was less an enforcer and more a panicked cleanup agent, stared at the crumpled paper in Clara's hand, his face a mask of utter betrayal. "The quarry," he spat the word out like a curse. "Rose should have kept her mouth shut for just 2 more days. You two are ruining everything." He lunged, not toward the papers, but toward the attic door, slamming it shut and fumbling for the heavy iron bolt on the inside, clearly intending to lock us in while he dealt with the implications of Grandma's last message. "He's coming back!" Clara shrieked, shoving the note back into the envelope and tossing it toward me. We scrambled, diving past the heavy trunk debris, just as the man wrestled the bolt home with a loud, definitive thunk. The attic instantly plunged into near darkness, the single window barely illuminating the chaos. "The window!" I yelled, shoving a stack of old blankets out of the way to reach the sash. It was stiff, painted shut by decades of neglect. I put my shoulder into it, adrenaline overriding caution, and with a screech of tortured wood, the window finally gave way, showering us with splinters. Below us was the backyard, a steep, grassy decline leading toward the overgrown woods that bordered the back of the property, the same woods that eventually led to the abandoned slate quarry half a mile away. "Go! Don't stop!" I pushed Clara toward the opening. She didn't hesitate, scrambling onto the narrow sill. "What about him?" she cried, looking back at the locked door where heavy fists were already beginning to pound with terrifying regularity. "He's trapped for a minute. Go, get to the car!" Clara tumbled out, landing hard on the damp grass, then immediately scrambled to her feet and sprinted toward the tree line. I followed a second later, scraping my side painfully on the splintered frame as I squeezed through. As I dropped onto the lawn, I risked one final glance back. The pounding on the door had stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard a sickening, tearing sound. The wood around the bolt was giving way under sustained, inhuman pressure. "Ben, hurry!" Clara was already disappearing into the gloom of the pines. I ran, propelled by the image of that man's face twisted in rage. We needed to get to my car, parked 3 blocks away, and drive straight to the quarry, wherever Marcus was supposedly staging his fake death. We burst through the dense undergrowth, tripping over roots, ignoring the scratches on our faces. The air grew cooler, damper, as we neared the quarry, a massive, jagged scar in the earth, long since flooded with stagnant black water that looked bottomless. We skidded to a halt at the lip of the precipice. Below us, the quarry water was still, reflecting the bruised twilight sky. "Where are the tunnels?" I gasped, leaning over the edge, scanning the sheer rock face. Clara pointed a shaking finger toward a small, almost invisible opening about 20 feet down the cliff face, barely above the waterline, a dark maw that looked like the entrance to a forgotten mine shaft. "There! He must be down there!" We started carefully picking our way down the slippery, loose shale toward the entrance. The silence was unnerving. The heavy footsteps from the attic were gone. Had the man given up? Or had he anticipated our move? We reached the narrow ledge leading to the entrance just as a low, guttural sound echoed from the quarry floor behind us, the sound of an engine idling. A black, heavy-duty SUV, the kind used by private security firms, was parked silently right where we had left the car 3 blocks away. And silhouetted in the driver's seat, illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard, was Mr. Davies, the estate lawyer. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. He was wearing the same tactical gear as the man in the attic, holding a long-barreled rifle that was currently pointed directly at the base of the cliff where we were attempting to climb down. Davies lifted a hand, not waving, but pointing directly at the small, dark hole in the rock face. "The exchange, children!" Davies called out, his voice now stripped of its professional veneer, sharp and utterly lethal. It wasn't Marcus's money he was after. It was the cargo he was transporting for me. And now, you're going to deliver it. Davies' voice, amplified by the stillness of the quarry bowl, was cold command. "The exchange, children. Deliver it." My mind raced, scrambling to connect the dots. Marcus wasn't a consultant. He was a mule. Grandma Rose wasn't just keeping secrets. She was keeping a key, perhaps a ledger, to something far more valuable than money, something Marcus was supposed to hand off. And now, both Marcus and Grandma were dead, leaving Clara and me as the unwitting couriers holding the instruction manual. "What cargo?" I shouted back, tightening my grip on the crumbling shale. "We don't have anything." Davies gave a dry, humorless chuckle that echoed off the water. "Don't insult my intelligence, Benjamin. Your brother never handled money. He handled physical assets. You have the key to his storage unit, and you have the location of the drop point. Rose's note was just bait, but I need what's in the tunnel. Now climb down, or I start shooting at your feet." He leveled the rifle. The sound of the safety clicking off was sickeningly loud. Clara reacted before I could formulate a plan. Instead of climbing down toward the tunnel entrance, she scrambled sideways along the narrow ledge, heading away from the opening, toward a wider outcrop 50 feet down. "Clara, stop! That leads nowhere," I yelled. "It leads away from him," she shouted back, her voice cracking with adrenaline. Davies shifted his aim, tracking Clara's movement. "Foolish girl. You think this terrain favors the nimble?" He fired. The shot ripped through the evening air, an explosive crack that sent rock shrapnel spraying across the ledge just inches from Clara's feet. She yelped, stumbling, but kept moving. I knew I had maybe 2 seconds before he adjusted his aim to a killing trajectory. I looked down at the envelope in my hand, Grandma's note. "Check the tunnels under the old quarry. He's waiting for the exchange. If Marcus was waiting, he wasn't dead." I threw my envelope, the one warning me not to open it, as hard as I could, aiming for the water directly behind Davies' SUV. It landed with a dull, unsatisfying plop. Davies didn't even flinch. Nice try, decoy. But the distraction had served its purpose. While Davies was focused on my futile gesture, I saw movement near the tunnel entrance. a ripple in the black water, followed by the slow, agonizing emergence of a head. It was Marcus. He was soaked, clad only in ragged remnants of clothing, his face pale and smeared with mud, but his eyes, those sharp, cynical eyes, were wide open and fixed on Davies. He wasn't waiting for an exchange. He was hiding, surviving in the flooded tunnels beneath the quarry, having staged his own death to escape the danger he'd clearly gotten himself into. Marcus raised a hand, not in surrender, but signaling desperately toward Davies. "He's alive!" I screamed, pointing. "He's down there! You don't need us!" Davies spun around, his rifle swinging wildly toward the water. "Marcus, you worthless rat! You think you can fake your own death and steal my payload?" This was the moment. Davies was distracted, the rifle now pointed down toward the water where Marcus was barely keeping his head above the surface. I didn't waste time climbing down. I took 3 steps back, lowered my center of gravity, and threw myself horizontally off the narrow ledge, aiming not for the ground, but for the precarious angle of the cliff face near the tunnel entrance. I hit the rock hard, scraping skin from my arms and legs, but I managed to hook my foot around a jutting piece of slate just above the waterline. I hung there, dangling precariously between the enraged arms dealer and my hidden brother. "Davies! The ledger!" I yelled, trying to keep my voice steady. "Marcus didn't bring the cargo. Rose made sure he couldn't move it until we confirmed her safety. The true ledger is in the attic safe, the one only we can open now." It was a desperate, wild bluff, based entirely on the fact that Davies hadn't seemed interested in the papers we actually held. He needed the original. Davies hesitated, his rifle wavering between me, Clara, who had paused her escape to watch the standoff, and the target in the water. He had been played by all 3 Adlers, Grandma, Marcus, and now me. "There is no safe," Davies roared, his composure shattering. "There is," I insisted, pushing off the rock face hard, swinging my legs up toward the tunnel entrance. "It's keyed to our fingerprints. You kill us, you lose the only access key to whatever Marcus was holding for you." Marcus seized the opportunity. As Davies prepared to fire at me, Marcus surged upward from the water, moving with surprising speed directly beneath Davies' position on the cliff edge. He grabbed the rifle barrel with both hands, wrenching it violently upwards. The subsequent gunshot went harmlessly into the sky, the recoil jarring Davies backward. Marcus didn't let go. He used the momentum to slam the stock of the rifle upward, connecting sharply with Davies' chin. The massive man staggered, his eyes rolling back as he lost his footing on the slick rock above the water. Davies tumbled backward over the edge, falling with a heavy, sickening splash into the black water, the rifle clattering onto the ledge near my dangling feet. Marcus pulled himself onto the ledge, gasping, mud and water streaming from him. He looked at me, then at the rifle, then at Clara, who was now running back toward us. "Ben, Clara!" Marcus wheezed, his voice raspy from confinement. "Sorry about the inheritance. It was a distraction." "Marcus, you faked your death?" Clara managed, utterly bewildered. Marcus wiped the mud from his eyes, revealing a manic glint that hadn't been there before he disappeared. "I didn't fake my death, Clara. I died to the world I knew, and now I need you to open that safe. Because while you were dealing with the decoy enforcer, I needed to make sure the real one, the money, was still waiting for me." He looked toward the darkness of the tunnel entrance, a predatory hunger replacing the relief on his face. "Now let's go. I have a deadline, and frankly, I hate leaving loose ends."